We had this little 900 square foot space, had 4 rooms. One was very tiny. That's where we stuck our servers and our coffee pot and all that. Had a little reception area with a work counter. Had a small office for myself. There really wasn't a whole lot of space, but that's all we really needed at the time. Most of our business was done over the phone. In 1988, our founder, Bob Harris, had been working with a company that had been selling audit defense as a multi-level marketing concept. This did not work real well, but it did, sell to a number of people that today are called our charter members. I ended up picking up overnight 79 audit cases from the Grapevine up to the California-Oregon border. I got in my car, went out and started dealing with audits, and I ended up, back then, Northern California and LA fought for the #1 and #2 spots in quantity of audits being done. So we were exceptionally busy and did a lot of audits through the years. Handling those initial 79 cases was a lot of fun. Other than the fact that I had a limited quantity of clothing with me and slept in a lot of hotel rooms, it was a blast. The people were happy that we were there to help. I would do 2 or 3 appointments every evening, and the next day I would go and meet with the auditor and get the problems resolved. I had a really good time. And I really felt like I was making a difference to these taxpayers. And they appreciated the fact that I was making a difference for them. So actually it wasn't that stressful because it was just me in a car dealing with auditors, which was my specialty anyway. I wanted to make sure that the kind of service that I was providing through all the audits that I had been doing was what we would adopt as a standard of care for our customers. I've always been very driven by the fact that you must take care of your customers, because if you don't, somebody else will. And so all the way through the development of what is now a very large company that I would never have expected to have built, we've maintained that standard of care. The customer comes first. So by 1992, we had gone from a point where we actually started increasing sales fairly well. And I was getting so busy that there was absolutely no way that I could continue doing all of the Northern California audits by myself. So I started actually looking for a partner to join the business who really enjoyed the audits and felt the same way about customer service as I did. I had met Nancy Farwell in 1987 at a NAEA convention. And she and I talked through the years, and we'd see each other about once a year and talk about how we felt about business, how we felt about taxpayers, how we felt about how you treat your clients and customers. And she was probably the best fit that I knew of at the time. She moved to Sacramento, and we started doing these audits together. So here we are in this little 900 square foot office doing these audits, and we were doing more and more and more audits. For Nancy and I, when we were sitting there doing all these audits, we realized that there were several ways that you could be successful in doing audit representation. The first was to be a leader in the engagement. If the taxpayer knew that you were there to help them and lead them through one of the most unpleasant things that they're ever going to deal with, they became comfortable. And you always set expectations. I always take the worst case expectation of the audit and I say, this is the worst it's going to be. And when you got things better, which you almost always did, they were thrilled. But taxpayers want to know what the worst case scenario is. If the worst case scenario is you're going to spend 7 years in jail, at least tell them and it'll be fine. But anything that's better than their expectation, you tell them what the process is going to be all about, you tell them what they can expect to happen, and you give them the complete inventory of things that you're going to need in order to help them. August 12th of 1996 was one of those watershed events. Bob Harris, our founder, came up and said, Mark, I need somebody to take over the audit side. It's not working out real well the way it is. Can you please do this and take care of the nationwide audits, do the tax hotline, write the newsletter, do anything that we need in order to get the technical side and that's everything but finance and marketing done for the company. I said, sure, sounds like fun. So Nancy and I and our receptionist became the technical side of TaxAudit. She and I really had a pretty finely tuned machine. So when we took over the management of the whole technical side of the business, we knew what we were doing, we knew how to work together, we had a pretty much a standard of care. We had developed sort of a successful method of audit representation that we felt that we could continue with. By 1998, we'd been making good inroads into sales into the medical community and dental community. Had a lot of, especially emergency room physicians and things along that line. So sales were doing much better. And Nancy and I were beginning to lose our little minds. We decided, well, we've got to hire somebody. So we put an ad out, and we ended up finding Jane strictly by accident, more than anything else. She ends up being sent out for this interview, substituting for somebody else that we were supposed to interview, who didn't really want the job because he really wanted his summers off, and sent Jane because, this really sounds cool, Jane. Why don't you go, interview for this position?
After I met with them and they told me about what they did and what the company did, I remember driving home thinking, I might actually want to do this. So I struggled with why? Why do I suddenly want to work year round? And what is making me, why is my gut saying, you should go work for these people? And thinking back, I saw such a passion, and I could tell that what they were doing meant so much to them and that they were helping people.
She gave her notice, took a vacation, and showed up about a month later. And Nancy and I had gotten tired of waiting for her to show up, so we said, well, okay, she's showing up, we're gonna go on vacation. So her first day, we were actually down in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
It was just kind of like, okay, well, we're gonna find out if she can do this. So I do remember being nervous because, like, what are these people gonna ask me on the phone? And the first call I got, I had no idea the answer to that question. And so I just told the caller, okay, I'll look it up and I'll do some research, I'll call you back. And that's what started hotline calls for me.
I've always been accused of being the big hairy guy that everybody is a little scared of initially. Jane is not exactly big, not hairy, and she's a very, very nice person. As we started to grow further and we actually started adding on staff, everybody was thoroughly convinced that she was the boss and that everybody worked for her. Around about October of 1998, Jane needed a vacation. I said, hey, go, have a wonderful time. So she went. The day she left, I got a call from Bob Meehan of TurboTax. They said, I'm trying to add on additional things to add to the comfort level of our users and additional opportunities and support services. So are you interested in offering a different version of your audit defense product to our users? And I, not being a silly person, said, absolutely, let's talk about this. So over the course of about a week, Bob and I had worked out the concept of this audit defense model. These were the very, very early years of e-commerce. And so them putting something inside TurboTax to make that purchase, that was a watershed event. So we got through tax season 1999. And Intuit says, we'd really like to offer tax advice services. Would you guys do this for us? And this call came in shortly after, like the day after Jane went on vacation again. She only went on vacation like once a year, so the coincidences here are just amazing. But I got this call, I said, sure, we can do that. I had realized that we're going to have to put together a call center at this particular point in time. So I went and started interviewing telephone vendors. So by the time Jane came back from vacation, I had negotiated the agreement with Intuit, but we had negotiated this whole thing, had the pricing, had the vendors selected on who we were going to use for the call center stuff, started looking at cubicles, and in walks Jane from vacation. And I said, oh, we had the greatest time we were gone. Look at what we've done. This is so exciting.
It was just 1 week, and wasn't gone that long. So I came back, and Mark and Nancy were there, and they said, "Oh, we have something to talk to you about." And my heart kind of sank, and I thought, "Oh no, what? I was only gone a little tiny time." And they told me about the Intuit contract. And I remember sitting there, and I thought, "Well, can you tell me that again?" And then I wasn't really sure exactly what that meant. And so finally, after a few times explaining to me what that Intuit contract meant, I was like, "Okay, well, I guess we're just going to go for it."
She said shortly thereafter, "I'm never going on vacation ever again because all hell breaks loose while I'm gone." That was the beginning of Jane hiring all of the people who were going to staff the tax hotline. And she was the person who did the hiring, the management, everything. Everybody thought that Jane was it.
And I was so excited about this company, and I had such a passion for what we were able to provide and the service that we were providing. It didn't take long before I had enough people to fill that call center. The people I was looking for they needed to also be passionate about taxes. They had to be people that were willing to learn and willing to talk on the phone, which wasn't always something a tax professional liked to do. So I had worked with most of these people before, and so that's why I was able to tell which ones would be really good at helping us out.
Early on in the call center experience, with these small little call centers you could barely get a body into with their monitor, and it was with big monitors at the time, and your little quick finder or whatever you were using. Had all these people in there, and it was about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. I was underneath one of the cubicles fixing or rehanging a computer. And these were big cases at the time, back in those days. So I was sitting there working on the thing, and I'm listening to one of the tax advice people talking to this person on the other end. And obviously communication was not being achieved. There was no way that this person was understanding all these trust issues that were being addressed in the call. So after about 10 minutes, I just sort of got out from underneath the cubicle and I said, "Will you hand me the phone, please?" So she handed me the phone, and then it was like this blur as she went running out of the room. I didn't know if she was upset that I had taken the phone from her or what the case may be, but I'm sitting there talking, and I talked to this person for about 20 minutes, answered all the questions, and she was so thankful I took the time to do this. And all these people in this call center look at me like I'd lost my bloody mind.
I was sitting at my desk, and she came running into my office, and she's like, "This IT guy, he took the phone from me, and I couldn't stop him, and he's answering tax questions." And I was like, "Well, no, that's Mark. It's cool. He can do it. He's qualified."
And see, this was part of the original plan. I wanted everyone working for her. It still works that way today. So in May of 2000, I was meeting with the people at TurboTax to talk about how tax season went with tax advice and audit defense, etc. And they said, part of their long-term plan was to get a return review process up. And I said, "Oh, I think we can do that." And so over the next week or two, I developed sort of a model on how it might look and what the experience might be, and then went down to Camarillo and hired a couple of programmers to try and make this happen. So by the time we got to January of 2001, we actually had this return review project that sort of might work. And we opened the Camarillo office. My job was to make sure that all the people in Camarillo understood what we needed, and we could translate that into operating software that could then make everyone else's lives easier. I spent enormous amounts of time down in Camarillo.
Mark had gone down to Camarillo, and he'd been working with the programmers, and he was only supposed to be there for 3 days, but he actually came back, I think it was a month later, and he needed a ride home from the airport.
There's no place to get a haircut in Camarillo. It was very, very much a strawberry fields community. And I don't mean it like Beatles. They grew strawberries by the acres. And I couldn't find a place to get a haircut. So I came back, flew into Sacramento, and I had never left my car at the airport because I never knew how many weeks I was going to be gone. So Jane stopped to pick me up.
I went to the airport, and this scary person came and knocked on my window with this big smile, and I was like ready to drive off, and then I realized that's Mark.
She looked at me like, oh God, I'm going to be attacked. Here, I had just grown into this mammoth bush. My beard was like down to here, my hair was out to here, and she was scared to death. She had no idea it was me.
His hair, it had grown into this afro that I had never seen before.
So, it's me, Jane, it's me. And she finally let me in the car. By 2002, the audits were increasing. We actually started using some of our tax advice hotline people for those audits and training them how to do it. Once again, Jane put the department together, and we started doing these audits one right after another. And that's when correspondence audits started increasing as well. So we had the staff. That's what they did off tax advice season. But we didn't know a real good way to standardize the paperwork between all of the audit reps, because we knew that if we wanted to make sure that every member's experience was identical, because we needed to deliver an exceptional and consistent customer experience, we knew that everything that we did had to be standardized as well, so that we could make sure that everybody met all the benchmarks of performance and customer satisfaction. So we started off with a paper filing system, and we used that for about 2 years to make sure that it really worked. We made a lot of modifications and edits to that system, and it did work. Then we took that paper system and we hired a couple of developers down in Camarillo. There was now a very small office all on its own, and we wrote version 1 of AMS. In today's standards, it was crude and rude, but it was still faster than the paper system, but it followed the same kind of rules. It just wasn't as user-friendly, to say the least. But this allowed management to make sure that they could review and make sure that our service was being delivered in a consistent fashion across the board. The sales were increasing, and we needed to open up an office somewhere that we could hire enough people to actually get the return review project working. We located the highest concentration of those tax professionals because we knew we needed to recruit talent, and it happened to be John Wayne Airport in Orange County. So we started opening up a suite that we could find that would meet our needs. Well, then we needed to have a manager. And our founder, Baum, said, I have this person who might be just perfect. I mean, he's really great. He's a tax guy. He's in my bridge club. I'm going to send him up and you can interview him. Well, none of the other people that Baum had ever referred worked out real well. So I was so unimpressed with the possibility of interviewing this person. I said, Jane, Nancy, he's all yours. I'm going to Camarillo. I got work to do.
We were like, okay, we'll just say we did it. We started talking, and the interview went quite well.
I went to see them, and I could see that they were preoccupied. Basically, they were going through the motions, and they were asking questions. Well, how's return review going? It's going pretty good. We did 30 returns. Oh, you guys all did 30? Oh, no, I did 30.
Nancy and I were both walking back to the office after the interview, and we looked at each other and we're like, who should say it first? He might actually work out.
Well, in 2004, I was basically teaching still at the college, and I was also working for a big tax chain. I was teaching for them, I was preparing taxes. I'd only work during the tax season, but I would prepare over 1,000 returns. I found that I wasn't appreciated at the tax chain. In fact, their comment was, we can train monkeys to do what you do. So this monkey decided to take his little jukebox and go elsewhere. They thought maybe I could find some people for their Southern California office. And they had said, well, we need attorneys and CPAs and EAs. And I said, well, you know what? I can get you tax pros, and I can get a lot of them, and I can get them quick. And they thought, well, now that's an advantage. In fact, Mark's often told me the best thing I've ever done was hire people. And he's right. I hire people that are smarter than me, and they do the work well, and I get the credit. First met Mark, and I gave him the initials BHG, big hairy guy, because he just had this big bushel of hair on the top of his head that looked really scary. He looked about 7 foot, looked like a Wookiee. So I was a little nervous that he might eat me for lunch. But I explained to him that he needed me because I could fill his offices with qualified people. And he said he apologized for not coming for the interview. And I said, that's fine. We had a good time.
Dave's idea on how to run a tax return review center was to get everybody involved and understanding what's going on. So he would stand up in the middle of this room, serve coffee like he was a waiter, and he would also, whenever there's a question, he would broadcast it to the whole room. Most tax professionals are very happy in a quiet orientation, and they don't really want to get up and say, I know the answer, let me tell it. Dave sponsored that. He made that. He made the culture and environment of that return review room, and that's what got people to understand that we needed their dedication and their help, and people super performed. We had people that were working until midnight every night just to make sure that we made our service level agreements, our SLAs. And those SLAs is what has always kept our contract with TurboTax. So it was important that we always meet what the expectations were. And Dave made it happen.
We've gone from a couple of hundred members to over 9 million. How do you explain that kind of growth?
The ability for us to have a continual, exceptional, and consistent service delivery. If we didn't remember to focus back on the things that we knew in day one, we'd never be where we are today. And our focus still is on exceptional service delivery on a consistent basis.
And the other thing that we've had since the day I met you and Nancy, is the why. We know why we're doing this, because we care about people. People are so important, and helping people when they're under the stress of an audit has been what has driven us to succeed.